Hey everyone, Vishwa here. Just want to welcome you all to the Current Case podcast series. Also, be sure to check out our social media. You can find the links in the description below. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Current Case, one word, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Current Case Podcast. Thanks again, and enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth and final episode for season 1 of the Current Case podcast series. My name is Vishwa. I'm one of your hosts for tonight's season finale. First of all, I want to welcome Melvin to our show. He's been one of the hosts, but unfortunately he's been a little busy this past few weeks. But Melvin, welcome.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder, guys, this is going to be our last episode for season 1. Then afterwards, we're going to be taking a short break, about 2 weeks, just to enjoy the holidays, relax a little bit, and then kick up some more ideas for season 2, which will start on the 6th of January in 2023. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And we've got a pretty good episode for you guys tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jared, and then he can start us off with the first topic.
All right, and also I do want to make a disclaimer there. During our break, I always plan on uploading shorts. I'm sure some of you guys, if something pops up, you might upload shorts as well, so we'll still be active on our social medias and all of that. We're going to be opening up a Spotify as well. Patreon's going to be going live, so they'll have links. We'll have links through our channel, so you can access that there. Anyways, though, a big topic tonight, which I think really has to do with our podcast itself, because last week we talked about something semi-controversial. So today we're going to be talking about cancel culture. So cancel culture, of course, has its own specific definition. It's been kind of twisted over time as things have, as it's progressed. Matthew, I know you wrote down a basic definition for that, so if you want to share what you got, and I'll share what I got, and we can just talk about what we think of cancel culture, how it applies to our society today, and just in general, how it applies to our podcast.
All right, sure. First of all, cancel culture goes by quite a few names, but really it's just the phenomenon of holding individuals or groups accountable for words or actions that others deem offensive or problematic. And note, it's other people. It's pretty hard to cancel yourself.
So as a podcast, last week we talked about gun control. So that's a big question, though, because we'll probably be talking about controversial topics upcoming because obviously we cover politics here. I assume there's going to be more stuff, especially as we go into 2023. And we're going to be stating our opinions. I'm sure some of us may disagree with each other. But what counts as cancel culture? So let's say I say something that might be maybe a little bit different from what the general norm believes. I know last week I also said, hey, we look at history. We shouldn't look at history just from a black and white perspective. We should look at it from, a perspective of everybody, meaning we have to look at the good, bad, that everybody has done in history, not just deem someone as completely evil, not just say, hey, this guy is a good guy only. It's like everybody's human. Everybody has made mistakes in the past. So really, does cancel culture, does it apply to this show? Are we going to say something that will get us canceled? I mean, if we state our opinion, are we deserving scrutiny for that? So that's like the big question I have. And in general, what do we think of cancel culture? Is it right in some cases? Are there instances where people deserve to be canceled or not at all? So I'm curious what you guys think.
Well, first of all, I think the biggest problem with cancel culture, the way it's portrayed right now, is it often lacks nuance and complexity. So in the rush to condemn individuals or groups, the nuances or the context of a situation can be lost, leading to unfair and unjust punishment. For example, a person may make a misguided comment or joke without intending to cause harm, but they may quickly and harshly be canceled without the opportunity to explain or apologize. So this can lead to individuals being punished for minor offenses or for actions that were taken out of ignorance rather than malice.
I think it's fair to say everybody in here has probably said something that would get themselves canceled at one point in time, whether it was just a dumb comment that we look back on, we're like, oh, Well, I was pretty immature saying that. I know I personally have said stuff before in the past that I regret. I know probably everybody else in here has as well. So, and I know, Matthew, you just mentioned, hey, it's like these one comments, people really dig into the past to find them and then use that against you, which is a big problem with cancel culture.
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, regarding cancel culture, is that in many ways, especially in this day and age, it's pretty easy to abuse. I mean, kind of like what you said, people will often go to pretty extreme lengths just to dig up one thing someone said in the past that may or may not come back to bite them. Even if they may have changed over time, they simply take that at face value and basically use it and kind of basically, even if it's not necessarily just to rightfully bring them down for something bad, but even if it's simply just to get them out, knock them down a peg or two out of simple spite. That's one big problem I have with cancel culture, is that these days it's often used simply out of spite. Matt?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ashton. I think by far the biggest problem with cancel culture, though, is creating the culture of fear and conformity within society. So, if individuals know that they could be canceled for speaking their minds or for expressing an unpopular opinion, they will be less likely to engage in open and honest dialogue. This can stifle debate, critical thinking, and it can also create an echo chamber. Think of, Twitter before Elon Musk bought it, where only certain ideas are allowed to be expressed. And this can be quite detrimental to society, and it limits the ability to challenge and evolve existing beliefs.
I was just going to say I
and
agree
norms.
with that completely.
Go ahead, Melvin.
It's just, if you keep canceling everyone constantly, what eventually people are just going to go mute. They just won't talk about certain issues at all, and they'll slowly regress to stop talking at all to certain peoples and certain individuals. It might accidentally ostracize them from their own group or from society altogether.
The vocal minority sidelining the silent majority.
And then what happens when you are canceled, right? I think it just creates a cycle of outrage and retribution that is almost impossible to break. Is when an individual is canceled, usually they try and defend themselves and push back against their cancellation, which usually leads to further conflict and animosity, and then creates another situation where individuals are more focused on attacking and condemning one another rather than working towards a more inclusive and compassionate society.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. People really they'd rather attack other people and tear them down. It's really about virtue signaling, I would say. People want you to know how virtuous and good they are, how moral and upstanding they are. So they do this by going out of their way to tear down other people, right? There's a clear difference between, condemning something ignorant that somebody says now versus something they said 8 years ago, for instance, right? Think about how much you change as a person over the course of a few months, let alone a number of years like that. And ultimately, what I've noticed, my opinion on this, is I think that, tying back into that notion of people just wanting you to know how moral and upstanding they are, they don't want people to change. Because if the people that they're trying to cancel show that they've changed and grown and become a better person, that ruins their ability to vilify them and treat them as an inhuman monster to push their narrative.
The thing that I want to also add is it's easier to find faults of someone than to find their good sides. It's easy to destroy stuff pretty quickly. It's hard to build it back up.
Yeah, Vishwa.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I think, honestly, when someone gets canceled, it's a matter of publicity and just singling out one person, whether it's a celebrity or someone local, and by getting the majority of the public to go against them and, see them for nothing more than what they might have either said in the past or they may have said and people just misinterpreted it. I don't know. That's why you really have to, especially nowadays with everything that's been going on, you really have to be careful with what you can say, with what you do say, because in the end, it'll come and bite you for sure, because, some people might not there's always gonna be like that one person that's gonna want to dig through everything that you say and try and get some sort of reaction from it to where they might either stir something up themselves or, stir the giant pot full of hatred and, just I don't know. It's just it's something to be careful about. And like you said, Melvin, there's gonna be a point where one little comment is gonna turn into someone getting canceled, and in the end it's just gonna be silence. There's no one's gonna be talking, no one's gonna want to talk, and no one's gonna want to share their opinion on something, because unlike before, the whole term freedom of speech is no longer, it seems like it no longer exists in society just because of how often people get quote unquote canceled.
But who gives all these people power? Like, why do they get to decide, what gets canceled and what doesn't?
I mean, that's a good question, but like the thing is, it's more so of a publicity thing. If let's say Matthew says something that someone else disagrees with, and they, whether it's a Twitter post or whether it's a single comment, it's people are going to see it over time, and it's just going to be, you kind of just develop that power, if you will, and that power is obviously a joint combination of, several people agreeing to one person's ideology or disagreeing to it. It really depends, but in the end, all those accusations and will go against one person, and then no matter what they say, it's almost like if you try and defend yourself, you're putting yourself in a worse situation, because people are going to be like, okay, so you didn't mean what you said, or you didn't mean what you said, but regardless, you said what you said, and we're going to take it like this, so you're getting canceled.
My view of getting people slightly, giving who is in power or who's in charge of this is not really on who gives these people power. It's more or less, it's easier to rally against something than it is to rally for something. Like, for you to rally for something, it has to be like extreme, and there has to be a large voice in it. The thing with rallying against something, it's like food. You go to a restaurant, you can find like 7 different things to critique about something, but when you ask, if someone says, "Oh, what do you think was good about it?" you can only find like a couple.
Precisely the point I was trying to make. Thank you, Melvin. That was great.
I think in many ways, cancel culture has kind of evolved in these days as to basically a kind of a form of censorship by mass. Ironically, it's basically the concept of using free speech to destroy free speech. And if you're essentially going to basically bully or peer pressure someone into basically silencing themselves without having the opportunity to explain themselves, what really are you doing with your life?
That brings me to another great point, Ashton. What happens when you suppress free speech in a society, right? Again, I talked about a culture of fear and conformity, that if individuals know that they will be punished for expressing certain thoughts or opinions, they may be less likely to speak out and challenge the status quo. But I think overall it leads to a situation where only certain ideas are allowed to be expressed, and where individuals are afraid to speak their minds. And what happens is, that can be particularly damaging in societies where there are already power imbalances, as it can prevent the marginalized individuals from speaking out against injustice and oppression.
China, Russia, and North Korea in a nutshell right there.
Just on the historical perspective, that has actually happened during World War II. They couldn't say anything, so they just had to ignore it.
It happens a lot during all the war, well, basically all wars. I mean, especially World War One's a good example here in the United States. You had Woodrow Wilson's suppression of anything negative coming out about the war. So, speaking out against the war was heavily suppressed, which of course went against the First Amendment. But since it was a time of war, they had special powers, which I was thinking about something. Of course, to sum up what you guys said, I agree. It's basically a mob mentality. People see, hey, what did this guy do? And then everybody wants to join in. They feel good about it. It's kind of virtue signaling. It's like, oh yeah, we're taking care of the trash because we're all joining in on it. But my big question is, are there people that actually deserve to be canceled? Like, does everybody deserve this open platform to share their views, or other people, their actions that they do deserve to be censored, essentially?
Canceling in the way it's done now, I don't really think there's ever a place for it. I think people need to call out others politely and, kind of say, hey, look, you're going a little bit too far, and then have a dialogue about it, not just, oh, he said something, like cut him out of society completely. Because, if you keep suppressing free speech, what does that do to the individual? When people, like last episode, right, Charity talked about the mental health crisis a little bit. And when individuals are not able to express themselves freely, oftentimes it causes feelings of frustration, anger, resentment, and all of those, I think, lead to a lot of mental health problems too. I think that's where a lot of those problems you talked about last episode stem from.
So should people be allowed to share their extremely racist, sexist views on any platform without consequence? Cameron?
Jared, I would say without consequence, no. But should they be allowed to express them? Yes. They have a legal right to, and society and the government have an obligation to uphold that legal right. We, the people, have the ethical obligation to call them out for their bigoted views. That falls on us, not the government, and not on social media platforms. Now, technically, social media platforms are private businesses, and they can enforce their own rules as they see fit. But I would argue that when they control such a large percentage of the market share, they have an ethical obligation to uphold the law of the land. Now, tying back into what you said about the whole mental health crisis and all that, resulting from people not being allowed to speak their mind, if we look at free speech and suppression of free speech, we might start to notice a trend of people going kind of underground with their off-color views, right? They don't have a place to speak them publicly. So what do? They go and they scheme and plot in secret, away from the public eye, which I would argue is far more dangerous. Now, on the flip side, if you look at somebody like Daryl Davis, he's an R&B musician, an African-American one. He actually has just had a lot of, civil, polite talks with actual KKK members, and he has convinced a lot of them to hang up their robes and turn their lives around just by treating them as people and having a dialogue with them, a good faith dialogue. But when you treat people like monsters and push them away, and you don't even want them to change, you just want them gone, that's when we start to get issues with people, going to extremes and shooting up places.
Excellent point there, Cameron. And I think that's also another problem regarding cancel culture, in that there seems to be like one of two extremes when it comes to what happens when someone attempts to cancel someone else. You either have nothing, pretty much nothing happens, or they go straight for the nuclear option. There's no middle ground when it comes to a lot of these people. And I think that probably hints that, I think another problem in that regard is that people these days, I feel, are a bit too used to instant gratification, trying to get their reward as soon as possible. And that, I feel, needs to change, because sure, it can silence someone, but at what cost, as we're highlighting?
Yeah, so a couple different hot takes here. If you think of people who have recently been canceled, I'm talking to the fullest extent, like Kanye West and Andrew Tate, right? They've both made some pretty off-color statements. I don't think any of us would debate that. However, at what point does it start to become inhuman to them? And if so, even worse than what they say. If you cut off people's bank accounts, if you cut off their ability to contribute to a society at all, is that really the best course of action?
No, because what's eventually going to happen is if you cut off their livelihood, it's going to get worse. So whatever they're saying, they might eventually do. So there's a difference between what you say and what you do. You can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, what you do is limited to certain aspects so you don't get in trouble. But the moment you remove yourself from, like, if someone removes you from your livelihood, things change dramatically. The worst case scenario, let's say something happens, you become homeless. Well, now you don't have an address, so when you're applying for a job, what address do you put? So it's like a constant cycle of no job, no food, I can't ever get back to normal society. And it's like one of those things where it's just like, someone has to give you a hand for you to even somehow come back to society. There's no other way.
Well, what happens when you back these people up to a wall? Do you think it's going to go over well? Or do you think, hey, I have nothing left to lose, I'm just going to go send it to whatever because F it, I'm done?
Indeed. Worst thing you can ever do is really force someone into a corner and give them no other option. Desperation brings out the worst in humanity.
Right. I always think back to that George R.R. Martin quote, which is, when you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say.
Exactly. Do you have something to say, Vishwa?
Yeah, so with the entire culture of getting canceled, I feel like your societal role also plays a big part of it. For example, let's say this doesn't portray my affiliation with political views in any case, but if Donald Trump were to say something tomorrow that would, quote unquote, get him canceled, how far is that going to go? He's a man of significant power. Even though he's not president anymore, he has a lot of economical and just political ties. So if he said, controversial stuff before, and it was part of his campaign, but even after his presidency, he's said multiple things and he's done multiple things that we as the American people have either looked at in shock or in disbelief or just not surprised at all. But I feel like, political and just like societal power also plays a big role in whether or not someone getting canceled actually is going to affect their life. Sure, with most instances, someone that's been canceled, it stays controversial for a little bit and it kind of just subsides as time goes on. But I think smaller like artists and like, musicians and people of less societal power, those, when they get canceled, it's more of an impact than, someone of significant power.
Yeah, I suppose the higher up you are, the harder the fall will be.
Exactly. And I will say, I absolutely hate censorship. So I know, Matthew, you mentioned Andrew Tate. We might have varying opinions on the guy. I've watched his TikToks before. I've watched his podcasts. I absolutely disagree with what he has to say. But when I saw he was banned, I was absolutely disappointed. I envisioned a free platform where, hey, you disagree with the guy, you should be able to debate him, call him out on stuff. Of course, Kanye West, I feel like, is a whole different ball game. It's, even Elon Musk himself banned the guy, and we know Elon Musk he's had skewed views on what he wants Twitter to be. But Andrew Tate, yeah, I agree. Like, it should be open. He should be able to say what he wants to say. But people should be able to debate the guy, go back and forth with each other. I definitely agree it's an open platform, and I think we're seeing lots of censorship really take over in these big tech companies. Like YouTube, for example, you got the removal of the dislike button, which they had their own just random reason for removing it. But, I think the obvious reason that they didn't stay was protecting their companies that they support, protecting most likely the big big people in the White House, for example. Of course, it makes me feel better not to see the dislikes, but still, I mean, I want I want to hear what people have to say, and you're removing that dislike button. It's like you're taking away a voice.
Did you guys? So a while back, did you guys remember when Facebook was thinking about putting in a dislike button?
Yep, I do remember that.
I'm not sure why they ended up not doing it, but I think we can all take a guess. But I mean, that hasn't stopped anyone from getting into stupid debates and just expressing their opinion about something, about a post, and like either using the laughing emoji, the angering emoji, or whatever else, Facebook offers. It's a big part, like something I remember seeing was when a lot of companies were, changing their profile pictures to support pride or, whatever else. A lot of the reaction was, laughing or, the anger emoji. It's just I feel like social media's, like perspective on, the dislike button being the dislike button, that's never going to be the case, because there's always going to be one way to express your opinion, whether you disagree or agree with something that someone posts on, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But I also think with, when someone comes out and says something specific, you may not agree with it, the person next to you may not agree with it, but there's always going to be someone that will agree with whatever they're saying. And, it's kind of it's just, I don't know, when society is as sensitive as it is, and I'm not saying this as an insult, I'm just saying, the slightest comment can get you quote unquote canceled. You have to really analyze the people that are going against you. What's their perspective? What's their opinion? Do they not agree with you because they just don't like you, or is it because they genuinely think, what you're saying is wrong, or, but I don't know. I think it's something for up for debate. And, Jared, like you said, the whole dislike button with YouTube, I think them taking that away can trigger someone to say that's removal of freedom of speech, because you're basically at that point, your choice is to either like the video or just not say anything, just comment instead. But again, that's an alternative way to express your opinion about something you don't like.
And then Cameron, I know we had talked previously a bit about Andrew Tate, because you had a different view than Jared. So if you want to go ahead and talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So I wouldn't necessarily say I like the guy. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but based on the research that I did do, I haven't found any evidence of, the claims people have made that he moved to Romania because it's easier to sexually assault women. Now, if I'm wrong on that, then, feel free to correct me, but I haven't seen any evidence of that claim. And really, all of the advice I've seen him giving to young men is basically just like classic dad advice from 10, 20 years ago, work out, be a high quality person, don't hang around low quality people, just be a man, I don't really think there's anything wrong with that, and I don't think there's anything worth canceling him over in regards to that. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah, you don't have to like the guy.
I could be wrong. I mean...
Yeah, you don't have to like the guy, but he has said some quality stuff. Although, from the couple articles I read, he's also said quite a few negative things. But, there's a good and bad side to every coin, right? There's some decent advice you can pick out of there, regardless.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning is that, is it really worth jumping straight to the nuclear option for even the slightest transgression? Because there's a very good reason why, at least in a military sense, nuclear option is very much a last resort. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
Well, do you want me to read why he was kicked off of Twitter? I guess we can make this, if it was deserving or not. So this is back in 2017. Yeah, but that was during the Me Too movement. This is when you're starting to gain some ground. He said that rape victims bear some responsibility for putting themselves in a position to be assaulted, which was a claim apparently a false claim. And then that's what got him in hot water. Of course, I think Twitter at the time did not like some of his comments regarding women. Which again, I mean, I'm just kind of restating here, but I highly disagree with a lot that he says. I mean, his TikToks I feel like are a lot different compared to his podcasts. Like when you listen to the guy in a full like hour speech or so, I kind of see a guy who just sees the world in a black and white perspective over his TikToks, which are pretty short. And I mean, there's some good advice there, but like I said, was completely against him getting banned off any platforms because, like I said, I think it should be open for debate. If you disagree with the guy, you should be able to talk to him, debate in comments or whatever, and maybe call him out on facts he got wrong, for example. Like completely deplatforming him, it's going to draw people to him. It's exact opposite with what these big tech companies really want.
Yeah, I think it's also a not so subtle reminder that the world and society we live in defies simplicity, and they make a mockery out of anyone who attempts to make it so.
Alright, well, anybody else want to address? Alright, so next thing that I wanted to talk about tonight is round 2 of a possible TikTok ban. So Senator Marco Rubio, he announced this past Tuesday that he is proposing a bipartisan legislation to ban China's popular social media app, TikTok, which of course is ratcheting up pressure on ByteDance Ltd. Because, well, we fear that the app, or at least they fear that the app has been used to spy on Americans and censor content. What they said in response is that it is troubling and encouraging, or then rather than encouraging that the administration to conclude its national security review of TikTok, that some members of Congress have decided to push for a politically motivated ban that will do nothing to advance the national security of the United States. This is what a TikTok spokesperson said in a statement. So, I guess we will have to see. Of course, you guys probably remember back 2020, Donald Trump was proposing a TikTok ban. Nothing came in fruition with that, but apparently this one has bipartisan support, so we'll have to see if something actually happens with this one. So big question is now, are we in support of a TikTok ban? I mean, does that apply to what we said about censorship at all, taking away a whole platform, or is this different? What do you guys think?
At the end of the day, it is a application controlled by a foreign entity that, upon national security review, everyone in Congress gets a special briefing about it. And if they think it's a concern, maybe we should take their word for it. Not everything they do is good. However, if they're pushing for legislation for it, there might be something underneath that we don't know about.
Yeah, I think the main thing regarding TikTok, and more specifically its Chinese parent company ByteDance, you gotta remember that under the CCP there is really no such thing as a private enterprise. All the major companies in China have to have some representation of the Communist Party within them, and ultimately they are subservient to the CCP and whatever laws it feels to impose upon the company or whatever it puts out. That has all sorts of problems when you consider that U.S. laws and regulations are pretty much in direct opposition to the CCP and their own beliefs, laws, and regulations. So, not only is that a problem, but repeatedly in the past, the CCP has proven itself to arguably be perhaps the biggest threat on the world stage in this day and age. They have I don't think they've ever really upheld any promise they've ever made to the rest of the world. I don't think they really should be trusted. And kind of going to what I was saying earlier regarding with cancel culture and using free speech to destroy free speech, that's something that the CCP has been exploiting ruthlessly, even with something like TikTok, basically to try and undermine the U.S., its society, and its standing within the world.
Yeah, Cameron?
Cameron?
You make some good points, Ashton, but, you know, we know that the Chinese government can't be trusted. But what about our own? I'd say there's an argument to be made that our own government is not to be trusted. I mean, we know for a fact that they've spied on American citizens before. And I understand that it's different when it's a foreign nation's government doing it. However, you've also got to consider that what the average person is doing is probably not of much interest to the Chinese government or the American government, for that matter. Now, they might be interested in what higher profile individuals are doing, sure, but most of the people who use TikTok are just random people, teenagers mostly. I'm not really sure what China's government gains by spying on those individuals.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's about numbers in that case, and they can get a pretty good gauge on our society and what we do as an aggregate versus targeting some random dude out in Idaho.
Yeah, that plus, like you said, Cameron, a lot of these people that use TikTok and whatnot are kind of the younger generation who's ultimately going to grow up to basically form the backbone of our society.
And if they control the algorithm, they control what they see, what they think, and I think it poses a larger national security threat than what we might see at face value.
So the question to that is, how is that any different from, let's say, Facebook or Twitter or anything like that, or YouTube for that matter?
That's why I don't really use social media. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's a good thing.
I mean, but you use YouTube, right?
Sometimes, only because there's not really any other platform.
I know, Matthew, you use TikTok a whole lot. I mean, you wouldn't be sad to see it go at all if it did go?
Not really.
Going back to what you said about YouTube being kind of the only platform of its nature, I think there's a point to be made there. You know, we've seen other platforms try to compete, like Vimeo and Dailymotion, but no one's been able to unseat YouTube so far. So I guess...
Plus, is YouTube really a social media platform? I think it's more of like a content creation platform. That's a little bit different.
Yeah, I agree there.
Fair enough.
It is, but YouTube released YouTube Shorts, and I think that's the direct competitor to TikTok, because what a lot of TikTokers do is they will download their content off of TikTok and paste it into their Google/YouTube account.
Yeah, very true. I mean, you see these all these TikTok videos all over YouTube, the form of shorts. Mm-hmm. It's like TikTok is kind of taking over a lot of social media. I mean, doesn't Instagram have, I don't use it personally, but doesn't Instagram have shorts as well?
They have a thing called Boomerang and then something similar to that.
Yeah, Reels. Instagram Reels.
Reels, okay.
Yep.
Like, we're seeing all these social media companies like trying to cash in on the short system. I mean, I have my own personal problems with TikTok just outside of the situation with the CCP possibly spying. I mean, I feel like the general attention span of society is going way down. I mean, we have to have constant 30-second stimulus.
Not even.
It's like 30 seconds.
3
That's
or
all I can
4.
watch. Yeah, 3 or 4. It's insane. I mean, I've seen it in schools, like these TikTok challenges have had a negative impact on the kids because they see them on TikTok, they become popular, and they go and try them. The most infamous one recently was the Devious Licks challenge, where they would steal everything out of the bathroom, whatever that would may be, like soap containers. I've seen people steal whole toilets before. Someone...
Wait, what?
You don't remember this challenge from a couple months ago, Cameron?
I don't.
Oh,
I really
well then.
don't.
Yeah, it was the whole thing. I mean, this is 21 now. I mean, I haven't been keeping up. I haven't seen too many recent TikTok challenges implemented in our schools. I mean, I still know the bathrooms are kind of a hot area. I assume that's probably in relation to TikTok. I downloaded TikTok for a day and then deleted it. I was like, nah, this ain't it. I'm seeing that negative impact definitely in the schools themselves, causing kids to do dumb things just for attention, clout, whatever that may be. And I mean, that's my main problem with it, even outside of the possible spying scenario as well. So if it was up to me, I wouldn't mind it. But.
To be honest, what's going to happen is if they remove TikTok, all these content creators are just going to move to another platform. That's all that's going to happen. It's not going to the what you basically see, these trends won't change. All they're going to do is they're going to adapt to a different interface.
Bring back Vine. That's the solution right there.
I think Vine was bought out by TikTok, to be honest.
Twitter. It was bought by Twitter back in like 2018.
Oh. Okay. Maybe. Or Musically or whatever it was. That was also a thing. I don't know what happened to that.
Musically became TikTok.
Yeah. Because I remember having Musically, and then I remember suddenly it just changing the name, so I just thought it was a different name. But
I mean, yeah, Vine was pretty harmless, at least in my opinion. A lot of it was good content over there.
Yeah, Vine was great.
I don't know what it is with TikTok. Maybe it's the different format compared to Vine, where it seems to be a lot more harmful to society. I mean, it's definitely good content, but still, I've seen the impact of it.
I think society was just better in 2016.
It's just a big societal change.
Yeah.
So if we had Vine today, would we be doing the same thing?
Yep.
Like if TikTok never existed, you think Vine would have just gone downhill? There would have been these challenges being implemented?
Hard to say.
there would always be something. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I feel like there would always be something. It's just people would either continue on Vine, or I think Musically was a thing that kind of killed Vine.
I don't know.
So I think people would have jumped onto Musically. And then if Musically was never bought by TikTok, I don't know what would happen after that.
I mean, is iFunny the same now as it was in 2016?
I guess that also applies to what we talked about in the first half of this podcast with cancel culture, everything else. I definitely think society in general is becoming a lot more sensitive, and there's some good things with that. I mean, some negative things. I mean, it kind of sounds like a boomer talk right there, like, oh, back in my day, society was had thick skin, but
I mean, there is some truth to that, though. You look back at our parents and grandparents, they definitely had some positives back then.
There was something that I heard a couple days ago, which was like something along the lines of, there's this really rich person, and then he was talking about a story about how, so I had a hard life, so I produced good outcomes, and then just to keep my money rolling, what I did was I had my kid have a hard life, but not as hard as mine. It's something along the lines of weak men produce hard something, and then weak men produced hard conditions, hard environments, or something like that, and then hard environments create strong men, and then strong men create weak environments, and then the weak environment creates strong men. So it's kind of like the thing where we had a period where...
Kind of, you're missing the important part. Strong men create good times times
Yes.
creates weak men.
Yep.
Weak men create bad times.
Exactly. That's what it was. So it's like one of those things where it's just an adaptation. Like, it's societies all over the world know about it. It's like there's a saying in my language, which is the person who eats the peel today eats the banana tomorrow, and then the person who eats the banana today eats the peel tomorrow, or something like that.
Yeah, and I suppose this has kind of been amplified as a result of people's pent-up frustration as a result of COVID-19, which effectively shut down the world for the better part of a year.
Well, the shutdown also created a lot more issues than just aggravation. There was a study done where it showed that I think elementary students or high school students aged by approximately 10 years in their brain development. That's huge. It's like, that's not great. And their test scores were also very low in comparison to previous years before that, which is kind of concerning. Actually, it's not even kind of, it's extremely concerning, because that's going to be the future of the United States in a couple of decades.
yeah, that's very true. I mean, I'm noticing it in general, whether it's behavioral decline. Kids aren't willing to listen to authority anymore in comparison to the past. Definitely grade-wise, general decline as well. I mean, a lot of that, I think, definitely goes back with the COVID shutdowns and messed up their growth overall.
So basically, the CCP fucked us all over by concealing the pandemic and letting it get to the point it got to.
Yeah, West Taiwan messed up.
They gave us TikTok too, even worse. Alright, but are we for a TikTok ban? Like, I mean, we were talking earlier about free speech. I mean, removing whole
At the end of the day, I'm for it. Because as we all said, all these content creators are just going to move to a different platform. So we're not going to lose anything, but we're going to gain a lot.
So
I agree. On the national security grounds, banning TikTok's probably the right move to make.
Mm-hmm.
national security wise, yeah, I mean that's pretty much what it's gonna be. And then if it's for any political gain specifically, then it's really bad. Because you have to understand, we literally forced someone to flee the country just because Edward Snowden, because he released some information that the government was listening in on you. So
Ooh, that's a good point. Are we for or against the pardoning of Snowden?
I'm for it. I think he should be pardoned. Absolutely.
yeah, I completely agree. He should be pardoned because he did it for public good, even though it's a national security risk. But this government is set up to be for the people. It's not for specific entities.
Not for the
Some
alphabet boys.
Yeah, some people don't seem to get the memo there. But that does bring up a pretty good question. Where exactly do you draw the line when it comes to this sort of thing? Because all too often, I think throughout history, there have been instances where someone in power has basically used the excuse of societal or national security to basically cut down on people's liberties and free speech.
George Bush, are you talking?
Yeah, there's... plus...
My limits on that are kind of, hey, if it applies to me as in I live within this country, I'm a citizen of this country. If I'm not harming anyone else, that's as far as they should really look into me. Anything. If I'm starting to harm someone else, or let's say, I don't know, put government interests.
Define harm.
I don't know, like slandering someone, or let's say murdering someone. That's like, those are kind of issues, to be honest.
So you should be canceled based on your speech?
Kind of, not really, but kind of. Inciting hate and violence is
See, but couldn't any talk, even the talk we say on here, technically fall under that category?
the way that
Because it all depends on who's the judge of it. Go ahead, Cameron.
I also think that in regards to that, intent matters. That's something not a lot of people want to talk about or acknowledge. Intent matters. If you're going out and trying to rile people up to commit violent acts and spread hatred, then yeah, you should be held accountable. But unless whoever is prosecuting you is able to prove that you are doing that, then I don't think that that's really, that's not like a valid reason to cancel somebody or even to hold them legally accountable. Intent matters. I know a lot of people don't really agree with that, but I don't care. It matters.
It honestly really does.
intent really
That's
does.
the legal basis for hate.
Jinx.
That's the legal basis for hate speech. What gets classified as hate speech. Of course, hate speech is something you can get charged for. If you're inciting violence against a specific person, against a specific group, culture group, whatever that is, that classifies as hate speech, and you are able to get charged for that. The Supreme Court has ruled that. It's what we follow here.
I think all that is to say, I think this society really needs to learn, or rather relearn, to judge these sort of things on a case-by-case basis, because none of these are going to be exactly alike. It's going to be all various shades of gray, and there's never going to be any sort of universal solution to this sort of problem.
But people don't like gray, Ashton. They like black and white, so they can just kind of think, oh yeah, it's bad, and no more mental thought process towards it. They don't want to do the extra work.
And that's the big problem. Okay. Anything else we would like to add on?
I think that's about it. So, I mean, it's okay. Do we think it's actually going to get banned? I guess I should add on. Is this another thing for political gain, or is this actually going to happen? Let's just guess right now and see you come back this and this.
Well, with bipartisan support, I mean, that's not something you really see too often these days. So I'd say there's a realistic chance that, yeah, it gets banned.
I think so too, especially given recent events with how sour a lot of U.S. and China relations have gotten. I feel it's probably going to happen at some point. Even if it fails this time, it's probably going to happen somewhere later down the line.
I don't know, to be honest. If the fact that if it is bipartisan, that it will pass, but if it's just a claim that it's bipartisan, then I don't think it's going to pass. It also depends on what the public honestly reacts to it. So if you have a large portion of the public basically say, no, I don't support it, then these politicians aren't going to risk their careers for a bill that they may or may not care for.
Matthew, what do you think?
I don't know enough information about it, but hopefully it gets banned. I think it'd be good.
Yeah, that's true, Melvin. I actually didn't even think about that, how people would react to it, the general public. Also, you have no idea. I mean, I feel like definitely a lot of teenagers would be devastated. Can't do gritties anymore for clout.
Hey, but teenagers don't have the right to vote yet.
That's
Most of them don't.
That's very true. I mean, it's Marco Rubio claiming it's bipartisan support, so I'm going to say for now, I think it will happen, just not immediately. I think sometime within the first quarter of 2023, I predict it will happen. So I'll say yes for now. Of course, we could all be completely wrong, and this will just be another thing that gets forgotten about completely.
I guess we'll see.
Yep. All right. So then the absolute last thing we want to talk about, this could be more of a quick discussion. I know I've been seeing these headlines pop up over and over again, is Belarus and their involvement in the Russo-Ukraine war. I've been seeing more headlines pop up stating that Belarus is first having military drills along the border of Ukraine. Looks like now military experts are saying that it's not likely they'd send troops to Ukraine. More likely they're trying to divert attention so Ukraine will focus on them, and so Russia could focus on the other fronts. I mean, it would be an absolute disaster if Belarus Lukashenko does actually go through with this. He's already very unpopular. If you guys remember the 2020 protests when he was elected 103% of the vote, it was absolutely wild in Belarus. And I think the military would turn on him if he does decide to go through with an invasion of Ukraine. So I'm thinking, I think he's a little smarter than that. I think he's trying to divert attention, so I'm probably agreeing with the military experts here.
Well,
I'm not a military expert, but I honestly don't know because I'm not either a Russian nor a Belarusian, I guess. I don't. Is that
Belarusian?
Yeah, Belarusian. And I'm not anyone near their border, so I don't really know. And there might be mistranslation or miscommunication of certain stuff, but hopefully that doesn't exist, and hopefully everything ends soon, to be honest. Because the war is just dragging on for way too long, which means a lot of people are dying because of just the length of the war.
Well, how's about I help enlighten you from at least the military perspective? Any chance of a Belarusian intervention succeeding in this war, I feel is pretty much absolute zero, because if you were to look along the region of the Belarus-Ukraine border, you're going to notice a lot of things that would pretty much signal against sending an army through there. Thick, dense woodlands, marshlands, plus this little thing called the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Pretty sure you've heard of that at least once. And considering that at the beginning of this war, Russia did launch an invasion from the northern flank through the Chernobyl exclusion zone and failed, I honestly don't think that Belarus, with its much less modern, much less capable, less large military, is going to have any chance of success. So that's pretty much it from the military perspective. And considering that Ukraine's pretty much been bolstering at least keeping troops in that region, just in case Belarus does try to do something. I'm pretty certain that any attempt at a Belarusian intervention, at least directly, it's gonna blow up in Lukashenko's face. But there's also the argument to be made that Belarus already is involved in the war, considering they've been allowing Russian troops to go into Ukraine from their territory. They've also been allowing Russian airstrikes to launch from their territory. I know there's at least a squadron of MiG-31s armed with Kinjal hypersonic missiles that operate out of there. But if Belarus gets any more involved, it's going to blow up in their face.
Yeah, I completely agree there, Ashton. It's hard to predict now whether or not Belarus will become involved. I mean, I remember the build-up with the Russian invasion, and after I saw some things, specifically I remember seeing a headline, blood bags were going to the front where they were building up their military. I was like, okay, yeah, they are going to do something, because people were still debating whether or not Russia would actually do it. But I mean, right now they're doing military readiness drills along the border. We haven't really heard or seen anything else besides that, so I'm calling the bluff. I'm going to say it's probably to divert attention away to get Ukraine to focus up there. But other than that, I just can't foresee them doing anything within their near future, just because I think it'll completely destroy Lukashenko. It'll blow up in their face, as you said, Ashton. I think he probably knows that as well. They wouldn't be ready to actually do it.
Then again, just because it's a stupid idea doesn't mean that they won't go through it. With it, because I think this whole war up to this point is a textbook example of that, at least for Russia's case.
Yeah, very true. So, I mean, hopefully he doesn't do it, but whether or not that even changes things in the war, if Belarus takes a direct involvement, of course now you could say it's an indirect involvement, kind of split, but if they take an absolute direct military involvement, does that even change anything in the war? That's the big question too. But I want to see more signs of them actually building up, like a invasion's imminent. There's like obvious signs they're transferring blood bags along the line of the border between Ukraine and Belarus. Like once I start seeing that, that's when I might be like, okay, yeah, they're going to invade as well.
Yeah, in this day and age, very few things remain a secret, at least as far as military speaking. If we do see signs, we're going to notice them, like what you said, the increased deployment of troops, medical supplies, etc., etc. We're going to see that coming, and we'll know if it actually does happen.
Exactly. So more information's needed for now. So right now I don't think anything's going to happen in the direct future, but that could change just in the coming weeks. All right. Anybody else something to address here? We ready to wrap things up for our season finale?
Well, guys, I think that's going to wrap up this episode and wrap up our season finale for season 1. As always, we really appreciate all the support everyone has shown thus far, and we hope to see growth and prosperity as we grow. We want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and just take this time to be with your family, relax. We're probably going to do the same. And we'll see you all next year. Thanks again, and have a great night.